Sometimes, what awakens the deepest desire in a man for a woman is not something he can put into words. It's not her beauty, not her voice, not the way she dresses. It's something that happens on another plane. Something he doesn't fully understand, yet it pulls him, calls him, pushes him to seek her out, to return again and again, even when rationally he doesn't know why. Carl Jung spoke of the soul as a totality that splits at birth, one part conscious and the other unconscious. He also spoke of the anima, the feminine image that lives within the male unconscious. And when a man meets a woman who activates that inner image, something is unleashed. It's no longer just her that attracts him, but what she represents within him, a symbol, a projection, a missing piece of his own psyche. That's where it all begins. He could be calm in his life, focused, stable, but suddenly he sees you, hears you, feels you, and he can't explain it. But something inside him begins to stir, as if a door that had been closed for years suddenly opens. Not violently, but with a kind of reverence, mystery, deep recognition. And when a woman touches that part of him he didn't even know existed, his inner world begins to tremble. And maybe you don't do anything extraordinary. You don't seduce him with dramatic gestures or try to manipulate him with words. You simply are. Your energy, your presence, your way of looking. Something in you resonates with his inner world, not with his logic, but with his soul. And that resonance is so powerful that he begins to seek you, to crave more moments with you, more silence with you, more connection. It's not will, it's impulse. The impulse of the unconscious, which often acts more forcefully than reason. What's most curious is that at first he might resist. He might not understand why he thinks of you in the middle of the night, why he remembers the tiniest details of your conversations, why he feels strange if a day passes without hearing from you. But that confusion is part of the process. The soul doesn't knock softly. It sometimes pounds with symbols, dreams, subtle obsessions. Jung said that what doesn't become conscious manifests in life as fate. And if you've appeared on his path as an active figure of his anima, he won't be able to avoid the urge to pursue you. Not out of possession, but because deep down he believes that in finding you, he's rediscovering himself. That's where the mystery's born. It's not love at first sight. It's not chemistry. It's something much more intimate, an echo, an archetypal call from the depths of his psyche, a longing to feel whole again, to return to the center. And you, without knowing it, become that symbol that embodies what he has never been able to integrate. The reason he starts looking for you endlessly isn't because you're missing. It's because something in you reminds him of what's always been missing within, and he can't explain it. He only knows he needs you close. In many cases, this kind of connection doesn't arise in the typical scenes of romance. It's not when you try to impress him. It's not when you chase him. It's often when you pull away, when you stop insisting, when you disappear, because it's in that emptiness, in that absence, that his unconscious screams louder. And then he starts seeing you everywhere, in songs, in scents, in fragments of conversations. You've activated him, even if he doesn't understand it yet. That's where his search begins, and this search may seem irrational. He might message you with meaningless excuses. He might approach you with fake pretexts, pretending he wants something casual. But behind every word, there's something much deeper. The urgency to reconnect with that part of himself that you made vibrate. This process is not always conscious. In fact, it rarely is. But that doesn't make it any less powerful. Jung explained that when a person comes into contact with their archetypes, with the forces of the collective unconscious, their life begins to change. Nothing remains the same. So if you feel that a man started seeking you out without an apparent reason, if you notice his attitude changed for no clear cause, it's likely you've touched that deep part of his soul. And that experience makes him restless. It pushes him to seek answers, to seek you. But here's something important. Not all men are ready to deal with what you represent. Sometimes, when the anima is activated too intensely, the man feels fear. Because what he's experiencing isn't just emotion, it's an awakening. An awakening hurts. It destabilizes. It forces him to see his life from a new perspective. And that may make him come closer or run away. But if he runs, he will return. Because he's not running from you. He's running from what's been awakened inside him. And the more time he spends away from you, the stronger that impulse becomes. Because the soul doesn't forget. The unconscious doesn't rest. And you now form part of his inner landscape. In some hidden corner of his mind, he begins to rebuild your image. He doesn't just remember it, he reconfigures it. He turns you into myth, into symbol. You are no longer just the person with whom he shared words, glances, or moments. You are now an inner figure that appears in his psychic world like a lighthouse, a point that guides him, that gives him direction, even when he feels lost. This is what Jung called the transcendent function, the soul's ability to integrate two seemingly opposite realities. In this case, you represent a bridge between his rational life and his unexplored emotional world. It's no coincidence he started thinking about you more often, just when he least expected it. Your presence somehow forced him to look within. But it's not just desire, it's transformation. A shift begins to occur in his identity. You've touched a wound, perhaps without meaning to, an old wound, sometimes connected to his mother, to his story, to the feminine that's been repressed or denied for years. And that wound, once it bleeds, also begins to heal. Because the figure of the Anima doesn't only fascinate, it confronts. And you, by appearing, become a mirror of what he needs to reconcile. The fascinating part is that he might continue living his life as if nothing happened, working, socializing, dating others, but the connection he felt with you doesn't disappear, because it's not something that can be seen, touched, or explained. It's something that is experienced, like a call, a kind of internal music that won't stop playing. And then he starts asking himself questions he never asked before. Why did he feel peace with you without effort? Why was there a sense of recognition, even without history? Why did everything feel so natural and yet so profound? That's when the soul begins to speak. Preservation of its deep emotional and symbolic tone. Sometimes the most important encounters have already been decided by the souls long before the bodies meet. And when he met you, even if it was briefly or under unromantic circumstances, something inside him already knew that you were going to stir him. It's not a coincidence, it's synchronicity. And the curious thing is that the more he tries to rationalize it, the deeper he sinks into the mystery. Because the soul doesn't act with logic, it acts with symbols, with images, with sensations. And you, without intending to, became a symbol for him, a symbol of the feminine, of the divine, of connection, of wholeness. As time goes by, that man starts to encounter you in his dreams, not always with your face, but with your energy, and he dreams of you without understanding why. Because the unconscious seeks ways to bring what's repressed into consciousness, and dreams are its most delicate and at the same time most brutal method of communicating what the ego refuses to accept. And there you are, appearing as a figure in his shadow, not in darkness, but in that part of himself he hadn't dared to look at. You make him reflect on his capacity to love, on his need for authentic intimacy, on his fear of being vulnerable. That's when the inner conflict begins. On one hand, his mind tells him he should forget you, move on with his life, pursue simpler, more predictable relationships. But on the other hand, there's a force that pulls him toward you, an energy that drags him without permission. And the more he resists it, the stronger it gets. Because it's not you he's afraid to face, it's himself. That's the Jungian paradox. You are not the cause of his transformation. You are the catalyst, the spark, the figure that has ignited the flame of change. And sometimes that change is so intense that he feels the need to pull away. Not because he feels nothing, but because he feels too much. Because you represent a part of his soul he hasn't learned to embrace. And love, when it's real, doesn't just enchant, it destabilizes. You are not in his mind as an idea. You are in his psyche as an archetype. And archetypes are not forgotten. They are integrated. That's why he starts to seek you, but not always directly. Sometimes he does so through excuses, sometimes through silence, sometimes by watching you on social media without daring to write, or by asking about you without you knowing. Because the soul's search is not always visible, but it is constant. And if you have felt that his energy hasn't left, that there's an invisible thread still connecting you, you're not imagining things. What you're feeling is real, because soul connections are not broken by distance or time. They only grow stronger when there is truth. Deep down, what he's seeking and looking for you is not simply you. It's the version of himself that awakens when he's with you. Because you don't just attract him, you reveal him to himself. You remind him. And for the soul, that is irresistible. Something fundamental happens within him when he begins to seek you without knowing exactly what is driving him. Even if he doesn't understand it, he's not responding to a superficial need, but to a deep need for integration. Jung explained that every human being seeks consciously or unconsciously to become whole, not through another person, but through confrontation with the internal figures that represent what has been denied, repressed, or ignored. You, without meaning to, become an initiator, not in an external role, but within his symbolic world. There's a part of his soul that had been dormant for a long time, waiting for the stimulus that only an archetypal energy could awaken. It's not about you merely as an individual, but about what you awaken in him as a representation, an intuition, a tenderness, a creative chaos, emotional depth, all qualities of the anima that men are often taught to silence in their upbringing. And that's when his world begins to fall apart. He may feel confused, even irritated, because he spent so much time believing that his decisions were governed by logic, reason, linear thinking. But now you appear, not as a body, but as a symbol, and everything becomes more abstract, more intuitive, more emotional. And that threatens him, but also magnetizes him. He is not in love, as he might be with just anyone. He is activated, moved, deeply shaken by a phenomenon that transcends the ordinary. He finds himself trapped between what he feels and what he doesn't understand. And that's why he comes back. That's why he searches. Because that part of him that has awakened will not leave him in peace until he listens to it, until he explores it. This kind of attraction doesn't obey rules. It doesn't follow predictable patterns, because it is not driven by need, but by the soul's psychic process seeking wholeness. And the fascinating thing is that even if you are no longer physically present, he continues seeking you, not necessarily in you, but in others, projecting what he cannot comprehend, feeling frustration when he doesn't find that same resonance. Here arises another profound dimension, the frustration of the irreplaceable. He may try to distract himself, rationalize, even convince himself that it wasn't such a big deal. But something inside him has already changed. And when the soul changes, there is no turning back. Because it wasn't your presence that transformed him, it was your energy. And energy doesn't disappear, it only transforms. Carl Jung said that what you resist persists. And this man can resist the memory, can resist the emotion, can even resist the impulse to return to you. But the more he represses it, the stronger the inner connection becomes. Because you have ceased to be an external person. You now inhabit his inner world. And then he begins to live between two worlds. The outer world that urges him to go on as if nothing happened, and the inner world that confronts him with the unresolved, with the spoken, with the intensely felt. At this point, the search is no longer voluntary. It becomes a dance between the conscious and the unconscious. And you are the thread that guides him through the labyrinth. Maybe he still doesn't know it, but in this dance, he is beginning a process of individuation, a path of self-knowledge that, according to Jung, is the most sacred journey a human being can undertake. Because it's no longer about loving you or forgetting you. It's about discovering which part of himself awakens when he thinks of you, what areas of his soul light up when he remembers you. And it's possible he resists the process, takes refuge in his routine, tries to ignore what he feels. But the energies of the soul don't fade through willpower. They manifest on other planes, in inexplicable moods, in voids that can't be filled, in silences that hurt more than noise. This isn't an obsession, it's a calling. And this calling isn't made by you, it's made by his soul. But his soul has chosen your image to speak to him, your essence to remind him who he is, your vibration to shake him from his slumber. And did you know that? Probably not, because these kinds of connections don't follow the conscious logic of the one who triggers them. Many times, you were just being yourself. No strategy, no expectations, not searching. And precisely there, in that state of authenticity, you touched his soul. And since then, he hasn't been able to forget you. This isn't a traditional love story. It's a symbolic process of inner transformation. You didn't come to complete his life. You came to reveal his emptiness. And that, though he might not admit it, is what's guiding him back to you. There is a silent truth that few dare to face head-on. When someone stirs your soul, no explanation is needed. It just happens. And it happened to him, with you. Not on the superficial plane of immediate attraction, but in that deeper realm where the symbols that govern our lives reside, without us even knowing it. And when a symbol is activated from within, it cannot be forgotten, cannot be ignored, because it becomes part of the psychic fabric that gives meaning to his existence. The symbol that you represent for him is not static. It evolves as he goes through his own transformation. At first, he might have felt you like a spark, something that confused him, then like a mystery, something that unsettled him, and later, like an absence, something that can't be filled with anything else. And that's where Jung's principle of wholeness comes into play. Jung proposed that the human soul, in its process of development, tends toward the integration of opposites, masculine with feminine, conscious with unconscious, rational with emotional. And you, without seeking it, embody that point of union within him. Not because you are the solution, but because you activate the question. The desire that begins to grow in him is no longer about possessing, conquering, or obtaining a clear answer. It's a much deeper desire. To understand, but not to understand you, to understand himself through you, because you serve as a symbolic mirror. Every time he remembers you, he sees a reflection, but not of who he is. He sees who he could become if he had the courage to fully integrate. And that, although it may seem subtle, is an inner revolution. He begins to notice it in small things, changes in his emotions, a sensitivity he never had before, an introspection that makes him uncomfortable, insecurities that disorient him, and also flashes of a peace he never felt, however brief, however inexplicable. Because you don't just confront him with his shadow, you also show him a vision of his light. And that is the most unsettling part of all. It's not just that you touched him, it's that you revealed him. You forced him to feel. And feeling, for many men, is not an everyday thing. It's something that for years has been judged, repressed, postponed. But when the soul decides it's time to wake up, it does so without asking permission. And your presence was the key that opened that door. He starts to look for you like someone searching for the answer to a question he hasn't yet formulated. He might do it clumsily, with long silences, short messages, distances he doesn't understand. But behind every attempt at connection lies a seed, an impulse born from the depths of his being, pushing him toward what his soul intuitively knows is necessary for his evolution. It's not romantic love. It's not attachment. It's destiny. And that destiny has more to do with his growth than with your company. Sometimes souls cross paths to ignite fires they didn't know existed. You are not his home. You are the fire that forces him to rebuild himself from the ashes. And although this may sound poetic, for him, it is painfully real. He starts to see the world differently. He no longer enjoys the same things, no longer laughs the same way, no longer feels whole in the situations where he once felt safe. Because you've shattered the internal narrative he used to protect himself from pain, from intimacy, from vulnerability. And that's why he seeks you, not to be saved, but because he intuits, though he may not yet know how to put it into words, that there's something in you that connects him with his truth. And the more he distances himself from you, the louder his soul becomes. It's not about control. It's not about insistence. It's about an emotional memory that cannot be erased. An energetic imprint left not on his mind, but on his psyche, his most intimate structure. And in that imprint, you are still alive. Because it's not about forgetting a conversation. It's about having felt something in your presence so real that everything else became blurred. Maybe he's not ready for what you represent. Maybe he's afraid. But the process has already begun. And once it begins, it never stops. It only transforms. Sooner or later, he will come back to you, not as someone seeking a woman, but as someone seeking a guide, a door, a symbol of what his soul is trying to reclaim. And when he does, he won't expect to find you the same, because you will have changed too. And perhaps, as he goes through all that inner storm, you have also felt something similar. Not in the same form, but with the same intensity. Maybe without knowing why, you thought about him more often than you wanted to admit. Maybe you too felt that his presence wasn't something casual, or light, or fleeting. Deep down, both of you were touched by something greater than yourselves. A force that can't be seen, but can be felt. That can't be explained, but can be recognized. A kind of soul language that only activates when two paths are meant to cross to reveal hidden, dormant, essential parts of ourselves. It doesn't matter if he hasn't said it out loud. It doesn't matter if he hasn't come back with flowers, apologies, or the perfect words. Because on the deepest level, where the soul speaks without needing sound, he's already returning. Maybe slowly, maybe with fear. But his soul has been searching for you for a long time now. And that's where the circle completes itself. Because you weren't just another chapter. You were the page he can't tear out. The vibration that continues to echo in his unconscious. The key that opened the door to himself. This search began because of you, but in the end, it's leading him straight to the most intimate part of who he is. And if you're here listening to this, it's not a coincidence. You're in the process too. You're remembering too. Because true connections are not explained. They are felt. And if you've ever lived something like this, if you felt someone started looking for you for no apparent reason, if you saw signs only you could understand, if you felt their energy even in their absence, then you already know what I'm telling you. And now, I want you to be part of something greater. I want you to share your experience in the comments, because your words might be the key that opens someone else's eyes, someone who is also going through this same journey. If this message resonated with you, if at any point in this story you saw yourself reflected, don't keep it to yourself. Leave your energy here. Subscribe, comment, share this video with someone else who needs to hear these words. Because when a truth is shared, it doesn't weaken, it multiplies. And maybe, just maybe, he's feeling something right now too. Maybe in the exact moment you're listening to this, he's thinking about you too. Because when the soul begins to remember, distance no longer matters. Only the encounter does. And that encounter begins when you choose to respond.